So welcome to everybody to this year's International Workers' Memorial Day, with a slight difference, of course, because life is now very much on Zoom. And we did toy with the idea for quite a long time. Should we do something virtually? Should we not do something at all? Should we do something small down in Town Hall? But we really wanted to take a moment to mark this occasion, especially after the year we've had. So what we've come up with is a hybrid where I'm here chairing from my nice, warm, cosy bedroom, and doing all the Zoom technical details. And Chris Willers, President of Leicester and District Trades Council, is down in the cold wind at Town Hall Square, and we'll be transferring to him in a little bit. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Seaton. I'm the Secretary of Leicester and District Trades Union Council, and I'm going to be comparing this morning and also attempting to let everybody in who's still joining. So just for the people down in Town Hall Square, so that you know, we've got about 25 participants on the Zoom call at the moment and plenty more people still trying to log in. So I'm sure we'll have a really good turnout. So I'm going to attempt to open the meeting by sharing some music from Red Leicester. Now, obviously they can't sing to us live here on Zoom because that doesn't work so well with internet connections and so on, but they've kindly provided a video of a song that they've recorded in previous times. So I'm just going to have a go at sharing that for us all just to kick off the occasion. Hopefully everyone can see and shortly hear what I'm sharing.
Yeah.
Because we all are comrades, wherever we may be, one union shall unite us, forever proud and free. No fascist shall defeat us, no nation strike us down. All those who toil shall greet us, the whole wide world around. My comrades are all others, forever hand in hand. Wherever people struggle, there is my native land. My comrades' fears are my fears, race, nation, state or town. My comrades' tears are my tears, the whole wide world around. Let every voice be thunder, let every heart be stone, until all tyrants perish, our work shall not be done. Let every pain be token, the lost years shall be found. Let slavery's chains be broken, the whole wide world around.
So I assume by the applause I managed to get the technical details to work there, and hopefully you're all able to enjoy that song by Red Leicester, and a huge thanks to our friends in Red Leicester for providing that recording for us. And I'll be sharing another song by them in a little bit. Yeah, thank you, Helen, and all of our friends in Red Leicester, much appreciated. So I'm going to start today's commemorations in the traditional style by reading out to you the names of the people who have sadly died as a result of an accident or an incident in the workplace over the last year. And after that, I'll ask you all to join me in a moment's silence before we'll lay a wreath down at Town Hall Square, and I'll switch to Chris at that moment. So just if you don't mind joining with me to remember those that have died in the line of their work over the last year. So the named individuals are Joseph Gardner, aged 63, who worked in construction. Michael Allen, aged 58, who worked in vehicle repair. Paul Wally, aged 46 years, who worked in manufacturing. George Setchfield, aged 21 years, who also worked in manufacturing. And in more recent days, there has been an unnamed man, aged 19, who has died on a farm in Leicestershire, but no further details are known about this at this point. Of course, beyond these named individuals, there are the many, countless people who have died in our county and beyond as a result of unsafe work practices due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whilst I can't name those individuals because there is no accurate record, we know those people exist, and we know that people have lost their lives because of that and had their lives impacted on forever. So I'd like to ask you all right now, if you don't mind, to take a moment to be silent for a minute, to remember the people I've named, the people I can't name, and their loved ones that they've left behind. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. What I've done now, hopefully, is you'll all be able to see the video of my friends down in Town Hall Square. Chris, hopefully you can hear me as well, and the internet's holding up okay. Chris is now going to take us over to the memorial where we'd usually be holding this event so that you can all see the flowers and the tributes that have been left there, if he can get his camera working down there, of course. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, yeah, thank you. Now we can see you, Chris. That's great.
Thank you. So I've got the Trades Council wreath, which I'm just going to lay at the front of the area. For those of you that don't know, here in the corner of Town Hall Square, there's a memorial plaque and a memorial tree that are permanently in place. We've also got some flowers that have been laid by GMB, Leicester Services Branch, and Unison Leicester City Branch, and also Leicester CND. So Mark, my videographer, is just going in to show you the plaque in the tree and the other flowers that have been left here. Okay, so and obviously everybody who's on this call can come into Town Square and have a look at any point throughout the year.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so hopefully everyone's been able to participate in seeing a wreath being laid. I know it's not quite the same as actually being able to be there in person, but I still feel it's important for us to mark this moment, and it's lovely to see other floral contributions down there as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to some speakers who we've asked to come and speak at this event. Each of them have been given around 5–10 minutes to speak, and then afterwards I'll start to draw the meeting to a close. So Chris, I'm just removing you from the spotlight. Okay, so the first speaker that I'd like to invite to make a contribution is Annette Byrne, who's the Lord Mayor of Leicester. So Annette, would you like to go first? Now, Annette, you may need to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Privileged to join you today to remember and doing job. Officially recognized by the British government, the trade union movement brings people to commemorate International Workers' Memorial Day. And this year they have chosen that work is a fundamental right.
Apologies, Annette, I'm struggling to hear you a little bit, so you might like to turn your video off just so the audio can come through.
Working in a safe and healthy environment should be a guarantee, but for so many, employers really fail their staff with practices and unsafe conditions. Now more than ever, as we work No, go on. Now, more than ever, as we work through COVID-19 pandemic, safety is paramount, and yet we continue of those who are denied basic health and safety protection, access to personal protective equipment, and those who fear raising concerns about their health and well-being. In 2019/20, 111 people lost their lives in the UK as a result of work-related accidents or diseases. Although this was a reduction from the previous year, everyone has the right to work in a way that ensures their personal health or safety, and while recognising that right, working conditions will encourage better productivity. It will also create healthier, more positive employees. It is heartbreaking to read the tributes on the TUC Workers' Memorial. Let us remember them all and strive for safer, healthier workplace for us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annette. It was a bit crackly at the start, but I think everybody heard the majority of what you had to say. So thank you so much. Okay, the next person that I'd like to invite to address us all is Terry Renshaw from the Shrewsbury 24 campaign. Terry, if you'd like to go next.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I first of all give fraternal greetings from the Shrewsbury 24 campaign for Leicester TUC and the event that's going on today. As we know, every year, 28th of April, we celebrate and commemorate the workers that have lost their lives while working to earn a way to pay their families and keep their families safe. They go out in the morning, and unfortunately, some of these people do not come home at night. This is the terrible tragedy of death in the workplace. The Shrewsbury 24 campaign was set up because 24 building workers were put into court. And they were put into court for campaigning for workers' rights in construction sites. And at that time in 1972, we had, on average, one person every day killed in the construction industry. Hundreds injured in the construction industry. And we still have the same thing going on now. And when we look at those killed on the day, that was only the tip of the iceberg. When you look at those that have died as a result of occupational diseases such as asbestos, when you look at the deaths there, they're in the hundreds of thousands and still going on. Even though we've not used asbestos in the construction industry since the year 2000, there's still people dying from that terrible, terrible disease. But we keep on going and we keep on fighting. April the 28th is a day where we shout, remember the dead, but fight for the living. And that's what we're doing today. We're fighting for the living and we're remembering the dead. And we've got to keep that fight going. Our fight with the Shrewsbury campaign went on for 47 years to get justice for the building workers who were put in court and put in prison for fighting for rights. That's all we did. On that day in 1972, on September the 6th, all we did was went out and fought for better pay, better conditions, and better health and safety in the workplace on building sites. That's all we did. That wasn't such a crime, was it? But the state saw it as a crime. And it would be amiss of me to not mention, because I am Welsh and I'm in Wales now, the battle that's going on at the moment within the DVLA. A government body down in Swansea who are not putting forward proper COVID regulations and rules to protect workers. I give power and I stand in solidarity with PCS, with those who have gone in dispute against their employer. And we now know that the Health and Safety Executive have gone in to carry out a full in-depth investigation as to how workers within a government body are being treated, because this is what they do. They say one thing, but completely do another thing. And I stand in solidarity with them, as I'm sure everybody else today does. But coming back to the Shrewsbury campaign, we fought for 47 years. We brought it to a conclusion. Unfortunately, along the way, 2 of our comrades dropped out. In 2017, 2 of the pickets said, it's not going to go any further. You're not going to win. It's a waste of time. Give up. And they asked for their names to be removed from the list that went to the appeal court. So we did that. We took their names off, but we went first of all for a judicial review, which we won. And having won that judicial review, the CCRC then give those 2 pickets the right to apply to come back in if they so wished. But they chose to come back in, not with the Shrewsbury 24 campaign, but with their own barrister on the coat strings and on the evidence that we had put forward as a campaign. And that's why there's a difference in when you see it. There was 12 from the Shrewsbury 24 campaign. There was 2 individuals. So that hopefully that explains that. We went into the appeal court on the 3rd and 4th of February, where the evidence was put forward by our barrister, Danny Friedman. He put all that evidence forward. There was questions from the judges, from the 3 appeal court judges. There was questions from the barristers acting on behalf of the CPS. The appeal court judges on the 4th of February withdrew and said they would consider their verdict. So it would be a deferred verdict, which they would give us later. They said within 2 to 4 weeks, but it was nearly 7 weeks on the 23rd of March this year when we were told by the court that we had a unanimous decision to overturn and quash all convictions on the 24th. That was a fantastic day in my life. It was a fantastic day in the life of the campaign. It was a fantastic day for all the other pickets. And lo and behold, we've got there against all opposition. We got there. We took on the state. We took on the British Secret Service. We took on the police, and we won. And we won with one thing and one thing only. We never gave up. We never gave up. We kept on fighting when others said to give up. We kept on fighting. And we had solidarity with those that kept on fighting. And solidarity is the strength that wins all arguments. And what I say to all workers, wherever you work, if you've got a dispute on, if you're afraid in the workplace, raise matters of health and safety. Do not put yourself in danger, because too many people put themselves in danger and end up not coming home to their families and to their loved ones in the nighttime. And too many people contract occupational diseases because they don't raise the voice in the workplace. Raise your voice. Be heard. Be seen. Do not be afraid. Solidarity is strength, and solidarity to everybody today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Terry, for those contributions. And really important lessons there for all of us to remember about the importance of solidarity and sticking together. Okay, just as a periodic reminder to anyone that's just joined the meeting, I am recording the meeting, Hopefully it will appear on social media later today or tomorrow. If you have any concerns about appearing on social media, you might want to keep your camera off for the duration of the meeting, because I can't guarantee that your appearance won't be captured in the video in some way. Okay, thank you, Terry. Next up, I'm going to invite Claudia Webb to make a contribution to the meeting. Thanks, Claudia. Claudia, you're muted.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak. My name is Claudia Webb and I'm the Member of Parliament for Leicester East. It's an absolute pleasure, of course, to join you all on this International Workers' Memorial Day. And I thank Leicester and District Trade Union Council, not only for inviting me today, but for all the work that they do for workers in our community. Today, of course, it's important for us to celebrate everything that the labour and trade union movement does and has fought for and won. From fairer pay to weekends, everything that makes the lives of workers tolerable has been won by generations of struggle. During the pandemic, I have been reflecting on how much of these achievements have been cut away during the failed neoliberal project of the last half century. It's hard not to wonder how many of the frontline workers that have tragically died due to exposure from the coronavirus could have been saved if recent governments had focused on building up protections for workers rather than transferring the wealth they create to the super rich. The unprecedented economic impact of the coronavirus has laid bare the weaknesses of our UK labour protections, particularly in relation to health and safety. Nowhere has this been more apparent than right here in Leicester, where along with the pandemic, we have had to endure the crisis of severe exploitation in sections of our garment industry. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs reported that over a 6-year period, a quarter of all UK textile factories caught failing to pay the minimum wage were based in Leicester, with some textile factories offering as little as £2 an hour. Some of these sweatshops, and I make no apology, even force employees to use the back door to enter. Factory overcrowding is also commonplace, and with a lack of personal protective equipment, this has undoubtedly contributed to the high levels of COVID-19 in our city. Companies like Boohoo were aware, deeply aware of endemic workers' rights abuses in Leicester's garment industry. And by procuring garments from companies that routinely underreport hours, force employees to work in buildings that pose a severe fire, health and safety risk, and which pay as little as 4 times lower than the legal minimum wage, they have been complicit in severe instances of exploitation. Yet they choose to ignore the plight of workers to seek ever higher profits. And it's true, billionaires exist when and where employers are exploited. We cannot allow companies to get away with this predatory business model in which corporate profits are prioritized above human safety and well-being. Women have borne the brunt of worker exploitation and wage exploitation. Indeed, recent ONS figures found that women working in Britain's garment factories are 4 times, yes, 4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than the average woman worker. These appalling statistics demonstrate that it's not only a moral and ethical imperative for the crisis of exploitation to be addressed, but a major public health issue too. And sadly, the vulnerability of workers during the pandemic has not been isolated to Leicester. Over 230 NHS workers, many more in our frontline workforce have died from coronavirus since March 2020. And tragic cases such as the awful death of Belly Majinga, a transport worker who was spat at, demonstrate the unacceptable risk facing too many workers across the country. This pandemic has demonstrated the need for unionised, accountable workplaces that prioritise employee well-being. Many of the workers I have been in contact with have had to show uncommon bravery to step forward and share their stories, despite threats of redundancy without pay from their employers. I mean, many of them are on 0-hour contracts without rights even after working for their employer for so long. Trade unions are the best line of defense against workplace exploitation. Yet the collective ability of workers to organize has been systematically eroded by decades of anti-trade union legislation, most notably the appalling 2016 Trade Union Act. The latest Global Rights Index from the International Trade Union Congress placed the UK amongst the worst violators of trade union rights in Europe. 40 years ago, 8 out of every 10 workers enjoyed terms and conditions negotiated by a trade union. 40 years ago. Today, less than 1 in 4 workers have that benefit. The 2016 Trade Union Act must be repealed. Trade union autonomy and sectorial collective bargain must be restored, and the right to take industrial action in accordance with international law must be re-established. Most of all, our union representatives must be empowered to ensure the protection of all workers, and the government must legislate to ensure this. The horrors of the pandemic, which have seen the death of an unacceptably high amount of workers, must be a turning point. Despite the undoubted success of the vaccine rollout, it cannot be forgotten that this government has presided over one of the worst and most fatal COVID responses in the world. Indeed, the Prime Minister would have preferred to see, so we're told, thousands of bodies piled in the street than introduce measures to protect workers. Whether or not he actually said those words, this is what happened. Tens of thousands of workers, working people died because of this government's delays and refusals to adequately protect our communities. We cannot allow this disregard for working people to continue. This International Workers' Memorial Day, let us strengthen our resolve to fight for a future in which the dignity, safety, and well-being of all workers is prioritized above all else. Solidarity, my friends, solidarity.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And important words there from Claudia, referencing what I said at the start, perhaps, that in many ways we will never know the true reality of how many lives have been lost in the last year due to the COVID pandemic, due to unsafe working conditions that people were put into during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's important that we never forget those deaths, even though we do not know their names, and we continue to fight for them going forward. Okay, next up, I'd like to invite Sean Lee from Unite the Union to address the meeting. Thanks, Sean. Sean, you need to unmute.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sean Lee. I'm the Deputy Regional Secretary for Unite in the East Midlands. Thanks everybody again for inviting me. I spoke at this event a year ago in what was then the start of one of the most difficult years I think most of us can remember. We didn't envisage a year of heartbreak, fear, uncertainty, economic disaster, political incompetence, and a global health pandemic. We didn't imagine that the health service that we all know and love, a service that was created to protect us all by a Labour government, would find itself on the brink of collapse, with the people that work in the NHS, from consultants, doctors, nurses, cleaners, porters, and every NHS worker having to work in such devastating circumstances, many to the point of exhaustion. And yet, shamefully, this Conservative government failed in their promise to deliver our frontline workers a pay rise that rewards and reflects the professionalism, dedication and service that we all recognise and proudly stood on our doorsteps clapping for only a few months ago. This Workers' Memorial Day is a day to both reflect and remember, And it's also a day to get angry, a day to reflect, to remember those that did nothing more than go to work across all industry. Many of them frontline workers that have kept our country moving, tragically never returning to their friends, families and loved ones, either through tragic working circumstances or as a result of an environment where they ended their lives on a COVID ward, leaving families in despair and heartbreak. So today, yes, it is a time for anger and it's a time for reflection. Anger that our loved ones, our colleagues, people just like us are put in this position by ignorance and negligence, and reflection as to why, and to remember that those that we have lost. Health and safety is a fundamental workers' right. Unite represents workers across all sectors and will work tirelessly to protect the health, safety and livelihoods of our members at the workplace. Before the coronavirus pandemic, we saw many attacks on health and safety protection, a media attack that attempted to discredit health and safety as meaningless red tape and stands in the way of business success. Yet the only red that I ever see is the blood of workers killed and injured as a result of this government's uncaring attitude, incompetence and greed. We continually see poor employers dismissing safety at work as to financial convenience and prior to the pandemic and relevance. A large proportion of British industry still refuses to provide adequate sick pay to help its workers' bills when sick or injured, leaving little choice than to return to work sick, injured, and potentially a danger to others. This past year especially has highlighted the urgent need for sick pay to be paid at a livable and realistic rate, and for there to be no excuses at all for employers to refuse paying decent sick pay. Now is the time for every one of us to use Workers' Memorial Day to say enough is enough. Enough of our frontline workers in the NHS, doctors, nurses, carers, bus drivers, and many, many more who have worked around the clock day in and day out to support and protect us, often without the protections they should have to do their job safely because of delays and the failing of this government in their duty of care to protect its citizens at a time of crisis. For far too long, we've accepted our lot, buried our heads in the sand and accepted that work can be dangerous. Death and injury is not an acceptable occupational hazard. Every life lost is a tragic loss to a family, a circle of friends, a community or a workplace. We should be angry, we should be upset, and we should be asking the government and the people that make rules and laws that let this happen why. Why? That's the reason we need strong health and safety laws, strong enforcement and strong trade unions. Never before has health and safety at work and the safety of employees been so important. We, the trade unions, have to challenge and highlight those employers that threaten workers with the sack. They dare raise concerns about safety to themselves and others. These are the type of employers who want our workers on the lowest possible wages, to work the longest hours, and sadly exploit workers as we're seeing with the immoral fire and rehire tactics being used by some employers to reduce terms and conditions, including health and safety, and using the pandemic as a smokescreen to further exploit those workers. Remember, it's your children's health in the future that's at stake, and it's your health now. There's nothing as precious as a person's life. If the trade unions and the workers themselves don't fight to ensure safety at work, and nobody else will. While it's our right today that we mourn and remember our colleagues who died at work, it's absolutely imperative that we do everything in our power to fight for the safety of the living. As groups and individuals collectively, we cannot accept that nothing done. We should demand that things change, demand that government and the opposition supports health and safety legislation that protects us and our children's futures, and demand that they increase, not decrease, our protections at work. It's about your life, your children's lives, your family's future. Let's ensure that we all fight to make our workplaces safer. Let's take action now. We remember those that we have lost. We organise in their memory. You can make that difference now, and we can make that difference in the future. Please stay safe and keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. So finally, I'd like to ask John Ashworth to address our meeting. Now, I'm not sure if the speakers are actually aware, because perhaps they can't see what's going on when they're speaking, but you are receiving lots of claps and lots of really happy, positive signs from the people who are listening to you speak. So a huge thank you to that. So last up is John Ashworth, please, if you'd like to address us, John.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much to the Trade Council for organising this event, as you always do, on an annual basis. And more often than not, I'm given the privilege and honour of being asked to say a few remarks at this event year after year. So again, it is an honour to be here. And again, I want to express my solidarity with the trade union movement in Leicester and elsewhere. My solidarity with those workers at British Gas who we've been supporting, the GMB workers who we've been supporting in their outrageous or in their dispute with British Gas over British Gas's outrageous fire and rehire and redundancy policy. I want to express my solidarity with the UCU members at Leicester University, who I know are in a particular dispute at the moment, and a dispute which I presume and expect, sadly, will escalate with the management at the university. To express my support to the Unite members at SPS Technologies, and I know Claudia was supporting them as well. And also, as Claudia was saying, to express my support for our garment workers working in sweatshops, who for too long have been neglected, abused, and exploited. And no longer can we allow that to happen. And we need to support those trade unions who are trying to get into those factories. And I know there are different unions trying to get into those factories to help those workers. This is a particularly poignant Workers' Memorial Day. And because we're meeting not in person, but over Zoom, as many of us have done over these last 12 months or so, because we've been confronted with a pandemic, a health crisis, which surged across the world with ferocity, which forced us to work from home, it forced us to lock down. But we are the lucky ones because we've got the advantage of being able to stay at home more and join Zoom calls from laptops. There are millions of workers who still had to go to work throughout the lockdowns in this country. 9 million key workers who didn't have the advantage of staying at home on laptops. Key workers who kept our society functioning and continue to keep our society functioning. Key workers forced to go into workplaces where ventilation standards had not been adhered to, where face mask wearing may not have been as stringent as it ought to have been. Key workers who were told that they had to go to work or could lose their jobs, and key workers who were told that if they were sick with this virus or had been in contact with somebody sick with this virus, would not be eligible for decent sick pay, so they could stay at home for 2 weeks or so without concern. The reason we've had one of the worst responses in the world to coronavirus is because we have expected some of the lowest paid to make a choice between going to work and spreading this killer virus or staying at home and not feeding their families. That is an absolute disgrace. And even though we are now 14, 15 months into this crisis, we still are not paying people decent sick pay to isolate themselves. We must dedicate ourselves that never again can we allow this to happen. The campaign for decent sick pay is integral to the campaign for health and safety in the workplace. Nobody should be forced to go to work if they are ill, putting themselves at risk of further illness and putting their colleagues at risk of illness. And it should come as no surprise to us that when you look through the statistics, it is those in the lowest paid jobs who have been disproportionately impacted by this virus. Our bus drivers, our taxi drivers, our supermarket workers, shop workers, security guards, those who work in restaurants, cafes, hospitality, and of course, particularly our health and social care workforce, where hundreds and hundreds gave their lives in this crisis because we sent them to the front line, or this government sent them to the front line without adequate PPE. So that we had nurses and care home assistants forced to use bin liners and old curtains to try and protect themselves on the front line in the face of this savage virus. We had doctors going to the B&Q and places like that to buy materials to make their own goggles and visors because the government could not provide them with the protective equipment they needed when they were treating their patients. And hundreds of them died. And what is particularly tragic for us here in a city like Leicester is that we know that huge numbers who died, a disproportionate numbers of those who died, were from our ethnic minority communities as well. So this year is a particularly poignant Workers' Memorial Day because it brings into sharp focus what happens when you don't put protections in the workplace for workers. When you send workers out there in the knowledge that they are at risk and are exposed. And not only are they at risk and are exposed, they are actually bringing the virus back into their homes. They're worried about infecting their loved ones, their families. They're worried about infecting their mothers, their grandmothers, and their children. So even if their physical health is not too detrimentally impacted, there's a huge mental health impact as well. And I think it's important that we focus more on mental health as well when we talk about health and safety. We know that mental health is one of the biggest drivers of sickness in this country. We know that waiting lists for intervention, whether it's for depression or anxiety, are getting longer and longer, and that people are struggling. And we know, sadly, that suicide rates are on the increase, particularly amongst men in their 30s and 40s. So these are the issues that we need to be raising and we need to be fighting for, because for too long we've allowed a system where health and safety in the workplace was seen as, we've allowed the Tories to dismiss it as red tape or as bureaucracy. It's not. It's about people's lives. So I hope we can continue to fight together and work together to improve the conditions, to fight for decent sick pay, fight for decent standards in the workplace, fight for a safe re-emergence from lockdowns in the coming weeks and months, and fight for workers, because no one should put their lives on the line just because they're going out to earn a pay packet, to put a roof over their heads or feed their families. So solidarity, and thank you for inviting me to say a few remarks again.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you to all of our speakers. So I'm going to start to draw the meeting to a close. Hopefully, technology permitting, I'm going to share another song with you from Red Leicester. And whilst you're listening to this, I'd like us all to again take a moment to remember those that have died, including particularly those that we will never know have lost their lives due to unsafe working conditions in the last 12 months.
Soaring skyward, leaping sideways, do or die words cleave the air. Joy and laughter, mornings after, raise the rafters, we don't care. If the roof's beyond repair, raise the rafters, raise the rafters, raise the rafters, we don't care. Sisters, brothers, to all others, let this be our guiding star. Hearts on fire, but no Messiah. Hear the music from afar. What we sing is what we are. Hear the music, hear the music, hear the music from afar. Over hills and over valleys, over mountains, over seas, nations shall sing until nations cease to be. Unison in harmony, until nations cease to be.
Thank you very much again to our friends in Red Leicester Choir for providing us with that video and the other video, and it's lovely to see some of you on the call joining in with that song. Hopefully it's not too long before we can actually be able to listen to you again in person. Whilst this hasn't perhaps been the usual format for Workers' Memorial Day, we in Leicester and Districts Trades Union Council thought it was so important to mark this moment, especially this year of all years. So I hope it's provided you all with an opportunity just to take a moment to reflect and to think about those that we need to remember. But most importantly, as I draw the meeting to a close, taking a moment to remember, we always remember the dead. but now we continue and we fight for the living. Thank you everybody for attending. Have a good day, stay safe and stay well, and hopefully it's not too long before we can be together again. Thanks everybody.